Well, thank you everyone for taking some time out of your day, out of your Startup Week schedule, and joining us for our panel hosted by Ford US on the new International Entrepreneur Rule. My name is Nick Baker, and I'm the Texas Chapter Director for Ford US. And so Ford US is a nonprofit started roughly 3 years ago, 3 years and some change, to pass common sense immigration reform. And the reason we set out to do that is because folks like Mark Zuckerberg, Marissa Mayer, Bill Gates, all recognize that our immigration system hasn't been updated in decades. And there are countless flaws with our current system. It's just outdated. Our border isn't as secure as it should be. Tech companies are having trouble hiring the talent they need. And there are millions and millions of undocumented immigrants who currently don't have an immigration pathway to stay in the country, despite having lived here for decades, and many of them having set down roots and having families in the United States. Fortunately, there has been a big immigration win recently that we have our panelists here to talk about today. It's called the International Entrepreneur Rule. So a previous major flaw with our immigration system is there was no immigration options specifically for startup entrepreneurs. And so that meant that if you were an international entrepreneur trying to stay in the US, hire Americans, create innovations for our communities, you had to use some kind of other immigration option that our panelists will talk about that isn't meant for you, that has so many flaws because it's not meant for startup entrepreneurs. And this is a huge shortcoming because immigrants are so entrepreneurial. Roughly 29% of all businesses in Texas are founded and owned by immigrants, despite immigrants making up just shy of 17% of the general population in Texas, meaning immigrants are punching way above their weight when it comes to entrepreneurship. Ford US played a big role in this new international entrepreneur rule. We were able to connect Austin and Boston and New York entrepreneurs with the White House to talk about what this new rule should look like. We're really happy with the with the draft rule that's been announced, but we think there's still some improvements that can be made. And one thing that's especially exciting is that y'all can have an impact on this final rule. The current international entrepreneur rule is still in draft form, and the White House is actively soliciting feedback and wants to know from you all, people who are in touch with the tech community, how can this rule be improved? And they have yet to release the final rule, so after this event, I'm gonna send you all a link to comments on how this rule can be improved and made even better for our local entrepreneurs. So with that, I want to allow our panelists a couple minutes to introduce themselves each, and we'll get things going. So we'll start with you, Jason.
Cool, I'm Jason Finkelman. I'm an immigration attorney here in Austin. I have clients throughout the US, focusing on employment-based immigration law, and specifically on helping entrepreneurs and startups internationally get visas to come here, work, and grow their business.
I'm Dave Wallace. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Angelou Economics. And Angelou Economics also started about 3 years ago the International Accelerator, which is really the only accelerator in the U.S. that solely focuses on bringing foreign-born entrepreneurs into the United States, right here in Austin, where we invest in those companies and surround them with an ecosystem and hopefully succeed. Before we go on, I do want to thank Forward.us and Nick in particular and the team here. They have been phenomenal. And it has been just watching the debates, watching the political landscape. Immigration reform, generally speaking, is kind of a toxic type of an issue. There's so many pieces to it. And the fact that they were able to pull out the entrepreneurial piece relative to border security and all of the other issues that are out there, that took a lot. And I just wanted to compliment them as well.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Michelle?
Hey there, I'm Michelle Skelding. I run the Global Tech and Innovation Initiatives at the Chamber of Commerce, which is also our Economic Development Corporation for the Greater Austin region.
My name's Liang Ji. I'm actually from China. I started business in Texas. I got a degree from Texas A&M, and while I was doing my PhD, we started a acoustic sensor technology. Now I have graduated and working full-time for my business. So I guess I'm the one you're trying to help.
Thank you. Thanks for being here with us, Leon. So before we go any further, can y'all hear us without the mics, or should we start turning the mics on?
Mic's on.
Mic's on?
Mic's on?
Michelle, is that mic working?
I don't know. Is it?
Can y'all hear that mic?
Oh, I'm too tired to talk about it.
You don't have to.
I know where the controls are too.
Sorry, give us 1 second, guys.
Maybe the
continue on before we get started.
Maybe the wired one.
Okay. Okay, so first question, just making sure we're all on the same page, up to speed. I want to ask Jason, what exactly is the International Entrepreneur Rule? How do you qualify for it? And how long does it let you stay in the United States?
Yeah, so this, again, is, as Nick was saying, is a proposed rule right now in a comment period. So the proposal is as follows. If you qualify for this visa, and we'll get into the criteria, you would get something called a parole status for 2 years in the US. This is not a visa, this is not status in the US. This is, in simple terms, a piece of paper that allows you to work in the US temporarily, okay? So if you qualify for this, you get 2 years of parole, not even a status, parole in the US. The qualifications for it are, one, that you've established an entity in the US within the last 3 years. Two, that you, the international applicant, have at least 15% ownership in the interest you're going to be running, and actually running the operations. Three, you have to show that the company has the potential for growth in the US by either A, creation or receiving $345,000 or more of investment from a qualified US investor, and we're going to talk about what a qualified US investor is, or receiving $100,000 or more from a qualified business development government grant, so to speak. So the first question on this is, great, I get $345,000 from this qualified US investor. What does that mean? So qualified investor for this proposed entrepreneur rule is not you, the international entrepreneur. It's not your family member. It's basically an individual who can prove that they've made monetary investments in a startup entity in exchange for equity in at least 3 separate calendar years, totaling no less than $1 million, and at least 2 of the investment entities, startup entities, have generated at least $100,000 in revenue, or at least 5 full-time jobs, okay? So that's kind of a high barrier there, but if you qualify, you would get 2 years initially. If after that, you still qualify, and then we'll go into the secondary criteria for it, you can get 3-year extension of that 2 years for a maximum of 5 years of this parole. The extension qualifications are that you still have at least 10% ownership in the entity. 2, that you've received an additional $500,000 investment in the entity, generated at least $500,000 in annual revenue with an average annualized revenue growth of at least 20% during that previous 2-year period, or created at least 10 full-time jobs for US workers during that 2-year period. So that's essentially the qualifications for this parole. Should we get into what the parole is a little bit, or come back to that?
Let's come back to that
Okay.
later. So David, now I want to turn to you. With the International Accelerator, y'all have worked with a lot of international entrepreneurs. What do y'all think of these criteria? Are these criteria that are reasonable for promising startups to hit? Do you think there are good alternative criteria for companies that may not be able to raise $345,000 in investment? What if you want to bootstrap your company? Are there good options out there for you with the International Entrepreneur Rule?
Is it okay?
Could we try that wireless mic?
Can you hear me now? Good. Okay. I do want to respond to that. I will tell you that the lobby in Washington, as it relates to different industry groups, trade groups, things like that, can be very, very large. And the $345,000, quite honestly, we think is too much, just because of the reasons that you were talking about. There's a lot of entrepreneurs that like to bootstrap. It's hard to get capital out there. And just from the International Accelerator standpoint, as we're making a cash investment, we're investing $50,000 of cash, but we're surrounding them with a lot of other in-kind services that technically those in-kind services don't necessarily go onto the capital account and are not qualified. So from our perspective, the $50,000 even would be a light amount. So from our perspective, I know the EB5 program that's out there, many of you, I see you shaking your head up and down, you know that. There's a large lobby associated with EB5, and so that group, I believe, was very helpful in influencing a larger amount, because otherwise it makes it competitive and it makes it easier to get an entrepreneur visa as opposed to an EB5. And so I think that there's going to be dialogue that's taking place over the next several months We've already responded with our comments on the 45-day comment period. We're recommending a lower threshold. We're recommending that instead of, quote, a qualified, there's a lot of angel investors that are out there. There's incubators, accelerators. Technically, even a contribution from a university does not qualify. And those are questions that we've asked when we were on the press conference with the government. So what we are suggesting and what we've set forth is that there are personnel requirements. As many of you know, you can create a job. You can have people that are working here. Maybe they're sweat equity, but you're creating jobs in and around the community. And having a situation where it doesn't necessarily have to be just one. Maybe it's a series of some of these different qualifications. So that's what we've recommended, and we're going to continue to fight for that because we think that otherwise people are going to be penalized just because that threshold is so high.
Thanks, David. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the EB-5 visa, it's what's commonly referred to as an investor visa, and it's one of the imperfect immigration options that previously existed for entrepreneurs. But you had to plop down roughly $500,000 to start any business in the US and create a certain number of jobs. And I think most of y'all are familiar that for startup entrepreneurs, $500,000, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for anyone. So it's a pretty imperfect option for startups. So one of the many reasons why we're happy that there now is this new international entrepreneur rule. So Michelle, I want to move to you and zoom out a little bit and talk a little bit more broadly about the Austin tech community. Why is it so important to have a vibrant startup community in Austin, and how is this rule going to help promote that startup community?
That's such a lovely tee-up question, such a nice softball. Thank you. Well, I just wondered from the audience that's here, are most of y'all here because you're interested in this rule because you need it for your business and growing and getting the talent that you need? How many entrepreneurs are here or folks that are looking to hire and you need talent? Yeah. What are some other folks that are in the room? Interested in this rule from an attorney perspective, from a client perspective, just generally about the ecosystem? Yes? The rest of you just can't wait to hear more about this? Other things?
I was going to say, I was, I guess maybe I didn't understand this, but I thought it was about, us expanding out into some international markets.
Oh, got it.
That was what I kind of had, but I'm actually really
Okay.
happy because in another iteration of my life, I have clients who hire from other countries, so I'm actually curious about what we're going to have to deal with. So.
No, that's good feedback. Anyone else have something real quick to add?
From personal perspective,
Yeah.
I'm an international founder on E2 visa at the moment, which will need to be renewed in 2 years.
Yeah, good. And so it's just good to know a lot about more what's happening internationally. Well, just from a broad brush and sort of looking above, again, I'm Michelle Skelding. I run the tech and innovation and global initiatives for innovation and entrepreneurship and something else. But generally that covers a lot about job growth, right? And the economy and how can we prepare Austin for the next level of growth. And y'all, are y'all from Austin? Everyone here is from Austin, right? No. From Houston. Oh, okay. Well, you'll be here soon. I'm just teasing. Welcome. Well, okay, no matter where you are in Texas, because we all stand together and we're all proud and strong, and as U.S., by the way, as well, as we learn about net new job creation in our country, where does that really come from, right? It used to be said it's small business, and yes, it's small business, but it's scalable small businesses, right, that are startups that are growing in fast pace, and we need to be able to fuel those jobs for the future to be globally competitive, right? We need to have scale, we need to have expansion, we need to work internationally together across many factors so that we can make our businesses strong and we can continue to grow here as well. How many of you know how Austin has been growing? Do you know how we've been growing pretty fast, do you think? Yeah, do y'all know we're the #1 fastest growing metro in the top 50 metros for the past 3 years, then over some? We're the envy of most cities in the country. And it's because of strong economic development, but also because why? Talent. The companies need access to talent. They need tech jobs. The jobs of the future are really about how do we compete for that next level. And so why this is so important to me, why I'm so appreciative to Nick is I think that it's been undershadowed, right? I don't think there's enough attention behind it. I think that we need more support in the community, and to have an opportunity like this is really fantastic. So to echo what your thoughts were, I enjoyed watching the Mark Zuckerberg. There's this video Mark Zuckerberg put out on this role. You should watch it if you can follow it up, maybe everybody, but it shows why he got passionate about it. And I think that we all have a personal reason of why we can see international growth and job creation and what we're doing benefit everyone. So I'm excited to learn more about this today.
Thanks so much, Michelle. And that's a great transition, because I now want to ask Liang if you'd be willing to share a little bit more about your background and about your company. I think you're a great example of how international entrepreneurs are contributing to our communities, and would love for you to just share a little bit more about Acoustic Shield with us.
Okay. Hello again. My name is Liang. So I grew up in China. I come to the United States basically for education, like a lot of international students. And most international students I know has a major in STEMs. So a lot of us has a really strong tech background, and most of us are really like trying to publish papers and get and graduate and find a job. But more and more students are looking to starting up companies. I personally know a lot of friends from UT Austin, Texas A&M, Rice University. While I was doing my PhD, we attended some event in school. It's called 3-Day Startup. That's where I met my business partner. That's where we brainstormed a good idea. So after that, we founded a company. So after I did that, most of my friends, they will ask me the first question, or the first 3 questions, not about what do you want to do. It's about, can you really do that? Is it legal? Do you have any, like, are you going to violate any rules because we're carrying student visa? It turns out there are some unclear points here and there, but we finally got through it. So our company is building a acoustic sensor. So basically, it can detect any anomaly sound. Our current application is focusing on detecting gunshots. So we're basically making a smoke detector for gunshots. So we're trying to provide instant information to law enforcement. So we want to install sensors in all the rooms. Those sensors are really cheap. You can tell the law enforcement like instantly how many shots were fired, what type of ammunition, what the location is, so they can prepare all the rescue, all the surgery room pretty fast. So for now, the current situation, whenever there's like a school shooting, for example, in Sandy Hook, it will take around at least 15 minutes to let the first responders know the accurate information. So we thought there is a better way to shorten those time. So after that, as a student entrepreneur, it's natural for us to get into programs in like student accelerator in school. And I was very glad to see, like, I come from China. In all Chinese universities, probably there is no such thing. But in at least Texas, I know UT Austin, Texas A&M, University of Houston, Rice, they all have like programs focused on accelerate business started by their students. So we had a lot of mentors try to help us get ideas, get feedback, and try to learn the business, the entrepreneurship. So we did learn quite a lot. And after that, I graduated, and luckily all my other business partners are U.S. citizens, so they don't have any problem worrying about those. And they kind of try to help me and trying to find help for me. But I know, so I graduated in May. Now I'm having OPT, which is temporary working authorization for 12 months. And if the company qualifies, we can ask for an extension for another 24 months. That's the latest policy. So within this time period, most of us will try to apply for the working visa, which is H-1B visa. But there is like a very small limitation for that, and basically now it's a lottery system. So even though you're not starting a business in the U.S., you're trying to work, you only have about 1/3 of the chance getting the visa. And I have friends who actually failed the lottery and has to go back home or find jobs in Canada and other companies. So I'm really happy that I'm really happy to see an organization Forward.us to actually hear our voice, to know a little bit about those international entrepreneurs, what our situation really is, and what the help we need, and what kind of difficulty we're having. So again, this is a really, really good thing. So I think I owe Nick a very Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Leon, appreciate it. And thanks for sharing your story. So you were saying that using existing methods to contact first responders, it can take as long as 15 minutes for them to know about a shooting. How long will it take using your product for first responders to be notified?
I was definitely within 1 second. It depends on the speed of the processor. So, yeah, we will try to make it like real time, so you don't feel there is a delay or something. So that's our innovation.
Yeah, so Leon, just want to thank you so much for the work that you're doing, because I think that's incredible, cutting down the time that first responders hear about these strategies from 15 minutes to 1 second. Like, obviously, these incidents like this have become a huge issue, and we can debate all we want about what's causing them, but I think we can all agree that we want first responders to be there and help on the scene as soon as possible. So Leon, thank you so much for the work that you're doing for our communities. So Jason, want to move back to you, and Leon got into this a little bit, but can you tell us, like, what before this draft rule, what were the existing options for startup entrepreneurs, and why were they less than perfect?
Yeah, and can we hear me without the microphone? Yeah?
Use it.
Cool, use it? Okay, cool. So I just want to, for a second, I want to double down for a second on what Leon was saying, so everyone in this room can really clearly understand what's going on. Does everyone understand what he's doing? Does everyone in this room understand the impact of what he can develop and the impact it will have on this country, right? Secondarily, does everyone understand that if that company succeeds, he will create jobs for people here in the US, will contribute to our economy? So here's what's happening. In essence, we are putting someone like Leon, who's got a great idea for a product that's gonna hire people, through a lottery system in the US. That's a shame, guys. Straight up, that's a shame, okay? Furthermore, going back to the entrepreneur rule for a second, when when the White House came out and proposed this rule, they said, we think maybe 3,000 people might be eligible for this proposed entrepreneur rule. Again, going back to what David was saying, that's ridiculous. We need to lower those standards to let more people like Leon, qualified people, come here to work in the US. So, in answer to your question, there are very few options right now for entrepreneurs and startups to come here to work in the US. They do exist, but they're few, and they're not easy, and they're not simple. The H-1B visa we talked about, there's 85,000 H-1B visas issued every year on April 1st. What happens is USCIS receives more visa applications than there are eligible visas. So they go, uh-oh, please don't send any more H-1B visa applications. We received too many on the very first minute people could apply. We're gonna have a lottery system. We're gonna let a computer at random select the 85,000 that will then be processed. The rest, sorry, try again another year. So you're getting college-educated master's degree, PhD level students going, but I want to start a business, but I want to grow my company. Sorry, it's up to the lottery, goodbye, go home. Not great, right? The other option, if individuals aren't eligible for an H-1B, is the L-1A. There is no cap on that visa. It can be applied for any time during the year. The L-1A visa is for intra-company transfers. There's a lot of people on this floor exactly who are on the L-1A visa. Basically, the requirements of that visa are that you go outside the US, you work for a company for 12 months in an executive or managerial capacity, and then that foreign entity sets up a US entity that's related either by a parent subsidiary, affiliate branch, and then you're transferring yourself as CEO, owner, president of the foreign entity to the US entity to work in an executive or managerial capacity. What's happened over time, real quickly, is startups and entrepreneurs have carved out a niche within this L1A called the new office L, which is to say, hey, I'm a guy like Leon, I couldn't get an H-1B visa, I'm gonna go to Canada, Mexico, I'm gonna start an entity, I'm gonna grow it for 12 months. After those 12 months, I'm gonna ask USCIS for an L1A visa, transfer myself as president or CEO of ABC Company Mexico, and create a new US entity, and ask for a visa for 1 year so I can grow that US entity, transfer myself as a manager or executive in that capacity. There's the E2 visa for individuals who are making a, quote, substantial investment, but even that visa is limited to certain countries. If you're from Brazil, Russia, China, India, Israel, a whole host of other countries, you're not eligible for the E1 or E2 visa. And beyond that, there are other options for OPT for 12 months to work when you're here afterwards studying. But the same problem, if I can just go into it for a second on the parole, is the big issue I see with this entrepreneur rule is, so you get your parole, right? You're here working for 2 years. you're here working for 3 years. The big problem with this rule is there's no option for you to stay and get an actual visa here in the US once you've grown the business, have millions of dollars, have created jobs for US workers, and you gotta go home, wait for one of these crappy H-1B, L-1A options that you may or may not be able to get. Same thing with getting a green card. So now you've grown this business, you wanna get lawful permanent residence, very difficult to do, right? So it's not a perfect system. And again, going back to thinking forward and all that you guys are doing, it takes a push of all of us here, whether you're a US business owner or whether you're an international person, to go, this is ridiculous. We need the best, brightest, highest net worth individuals into our country because it's only going to help us grow.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
So David, want to go back to you and more about the International Accelerator. Can you tell us a little bit about how the immigration system has affected companies that y'all have worked with through the International Accelerator, and how have the existing options kind of let them down or presented some barriers for the companies that y'all have worked with?
Sure, the existing options have been very, very difficult. I hate to say this, but as I was looking out, I saw a lot of eyes glazing over as Jason was going through the L1, the HB, the this. There's a lot of different options that are out there. And what that does is that really creates kind of the Lawyers Retirement Act of 2016 in all due respect. And he's done a lot of work for us, by the way, so I mean that in the nicest possible way. But you spend a lot of money. We have spent a ton of money in connection with these. Let me tell you, the International Accelerator was created solely because of visas, solely because of immigration. When Angelos was approached by a guy by the name of Lefteris, there's a company called Skooks. In fact, the COO office is here at Capital Factory. But when he first came to Angelos, he said, I need some help. I've got a company. This is what I'd like to do. I'm in Greece. I'd like to bring it to the United States. I'd like to create jobs in the United States. And initially, he was talking about this small place called Silicon Valley. Angelos talked him into coming to Austin. Angelos was very helpful in getting him acclimated and set up here. The one thing he wasn't able to do was to get him a visa. And even though he set up relationships, capital, investments, customers, mentors, angel investors, things of that nature, he was not able to get him a visa. So, fast forward 3 years later, at that time there were 3 sweat equity guys in Thessaloniki, Greece. Not really getting a salary, but sweat equity. Today there's about 45 employees within that company. We've raised over $6.5 million. The company's profitable. The company has already got offers to sell or to buy. It's doing really well. But I will tell you that because of the frustration that Lefteris had because of the immigration issue, 43 of those 45 employees are in Thessaloniki. Only 2 are right here in Austin. Now granted, it's a little bit cheaper from a programming perspective, but I guarantee you many of those folks would have been right here in Austin. So it's not just a situation, the cost of visas. I mean, it is a true economic impact to the city of Austin. If those jobs would have been created here, obviously we have the direct, the indirect, the induced effect on our local economy. That's gone as a result of that. This situation, this new visa is going to be very helpful because the capital that we invested, the capital that we arranged, would have met all of these thresholds that we're talking about, notwithstanding the fact that we're trying to get it reduced. A second situation, we've got a company called Restream. Interesting business. There's a lot of gamers out here. I'm way too old to be a gamer. I don't understand it. But there's a lot of people that will sit there and play games and compete against somebody halfway around the world. And most of the time when you're doing that, because of the bandwidth associated with the streaming aspect, you might be on YouTube or Twitch or whatever. There's plenty of channels that are out there, but you generally can only go one channel at a time because of bandwidth issues and latency issues. But what Restream does is it enables you to be able to play your game and go to 39 different channels throughout the world without any latency issues. So it's really kind of a unique situation. The 2 original founders spent a great deal of time at the International Accelerator, but they're in the Ukraine right now because of visa issues. And so it's hard to run a business and to invest and to deal with investor relations via Skype. We manage, we understand that. We've got folks that are over in Ukraine actually today having meetings with them as it relates to these visa issues. And I could go on and on, but every single one of the companies that we have notwithstanding the fact that we've invested in them, that they're doing well, they're hitting their mark. Jason is representing one of our companies called Picturesque. And we're having to create this multi-tier structure that he was describing, which means Andrews and Kurth was supposed to spend $5,000 on legal fees. We're up to $35,000 because of these immigration issues, notwithstanding the immigration fees that we're paying. So it has a huge economic impact to us. I know Angelos was very early on in this debate a year and a half ago. Was on phone calls with the White House, DHS, Forward.us, and others. We see this as a huge situation. Jason was very animated when he was talking about it. Thank you. We'll bring you over here. We'll educate you. You're the brightest from your country. We don't have a monopoly on good ideas here. There's plenty of good ideas. We'll educate you, and then thank you for getting your diploma. Now go home and grow your business elsewhere. Compete with us here. So this is a significant issue, and by virtue of the fact that Forward.us has been able to pluck this component out of all of the other illegal immigrant issues, border security issues, to be able to focus on this, I think it's going to create far more than the 3,000 jobs. I really, and again, that threshold I think will have a big impact, but I do think it's going to have a huge impact on us. We're economic folks. We look at what is the economic impact of this. This is a multi-billion-dollar impact to the United States. And I know that in the end, I'm sure that Nick is going to ask you to do this, but I think between now and October 17th, is that when the 45 days is up? We need people to be able to provide comments, input, and you guys have a huge voice. You guys are creating jobs, and this is where most jobs are being created, is the young entrepreneur that is basically starting, whether it's in their own garage and then moving here. And again, from an international perspective, Capital Factory is brilliant. It does a wonderful job. And I know from an international perspective, what you're doing as far as bringing people here, but to the city of Austin, bringing somebody from their garage to Capital Factory is kind of a zero-sum game as it relates to job creation. Bringing somebody from a foreign land here is a net addition as it relates to job creation. So this one issue will have a significant impact on our local economy.
Thanks for sharing, David. And you're totally right that so much of the time when we miss out on these companies, we're not just missing out because they're not contributing to our economy, they're competing against us elsewhere. And there are so many Capital Factory companies who office right out of here have faced this issue. So it's incredibly important for this specific office and for the entire Austin tech system and the entire country, honestly. So Michelle, you obviously have a very close pulse on what's going on in the Austin tech and startup community. What are you hearing from them about immigration? What issues are they running into? Are you hearing from startup founders who don't know what their next visa option is going to be? Are there companies who are having trouble hiring talent? How is the immigration system affecting our tech ecosystem?
So many good questions. I think, and just to kind of clarify too, I'm not with the city of Austin. So there's the city of Austin, the mayor, and the contingency, and then there's a public-private partnership, the Economic Development Corporation, that I'm a part of. We work together, but I'm not the city. So being a part of that allows us some of the things that we can do as well. We work very closely together. What I would say on the international side is, as we've grown so much, which we talked about, now of course lots of countries are very interested in us and they want to do international business. They come forward, they come to the city, and they want to know how do they invest money and dollars here in infrastructure. They want to know how to diversify some of their large portfolios over in China because they have lots of money there. They want to know how to synergize in terms of our tech talents here, as well as what they're growing overseas. And so as global interactions are happening across capital, across talent, across job growth, we're wholly not prepared. And what happens is those conversations don't go where they need to go. And we don't have tools and resources at the city or at the state level right now to truly capture all that's being around us.
Great, thanks for sharing, Michelle. And so Liang, I'd love to hear from you. How do you think this rule could be improved? Is it something that you currently could qualify for, or would you like to see revisions that would make it apply to a broader range of entrepreneurs?
Thanks for the question. So after I look at the current proposed rules, let me tell you a little bit about the rule. Is first of all, like 15% equity for the internationals. I qualify that, and I personally think 15% is fair if you actually devote yourself, all yourself into a business. That's fair. And for the investment, I think 3 years is probably fair too, because business can fail in a year or two, and you could definitely tell it. So 3 years is fair. In terms of the investment, I may have a little second thought or some opinion on that, because I know friends who are working on business in all different kind of industries, and it's very hard to set like one rule for all of them. Some are working on like medical things, and those require a lot of capital, so they can easily qualify that, but some are not. Maybe they're working on writing some apps, and those are really fast growing things that they can get customer pretty quickly. So I think for that rule, I don't know whether or not like 100,000 from the government or 340,000 from private investors is too high or too low. I personally think it's a little high, or I don't think you can simply put a number on that. You probably should have like a committee to review it and see whether or not this company really has a potential to grow, or whether or not their skill really qualifies for making this business grow. So in terms of that, because now it's only a proposed one, and I've seen friends discussing this type of rules, and most people are debating on the amount of investment, and some think it's fair, some think it's not. But I think if you, I cannot like make a decision on whether it's high or low. But I think people should ask, or they should look at broadly to different industries, because different industries are totally very, very different. And in terms of the timeline, for some tech or medical company, they need to get FDA approval, and I've seen friends, they're struggling, so 3 years may not be enough. So in terms of that, I don't know that side is right or wrong, so definitely there is some improvement space there. But in general, I'm happy to see people are trying to set up one such visa, so international entrepreneurs, to give us an opportunity or a fast track for us to stay here and work on the things we love, but not worrying whether or not I can stay here, or whether or not I need to take care of my documents, my legal stuff all the time. That's basically killing my brain cells.
Thanks, so it sounds like our other panelists have some comments to add here.
I couldn't help myself when you said they should start a committee. No, we should never have a government committee. I'm just kidding. No, but we're not doing committees for this. We should, but to your point, and just to throw some numbers in there, how many folks have raised capital for your company here before, been out raising, and know that that's difficult, right, unless you're in Silicon Valley? Yeah, it's hard. And so to put some numbers behind it, so I think getting a number that's right-sized for all of the areas that aren't Silicon Valley, because as you know, 60% of the venture capital dollars last year go to Silicon Valley, and then there's the rest of us. And the rest of us for Texas is we get 2.5% of that, and then 1.5% here in Austin. So like it's teeny, 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 teeny. And so I guess the point we'd add to it is that number, 345,000, would make sense if you're in the Valley, but it's certainly not going to make sense if you're in Tyler, Texas. And so let's make something that makes sense wherever you are, that you have access to capital, because it's very hard to do, and by industry sector, because of course the biotech and pharma is quite different, and it needs to have that built into it. So I totally agree. Just no committee.
I agree 100% with what Michelle said. I know when we were having conversations with the White House about this, the rule right now, Jason did a very good job of talking about the $345,000 investment, awards or grants of at least $100,000 from federal, state, or local government organizations, which again does not include even the University of Texas. That would preclude that. And then there's a catch-all that basically says, or partially satisfying one or both of those, which is very subjective. And I asked that question, and I believe the intention was a very noble one. It was, all right, well, there is a great company, just like yours, and maybe they don't meet all of these criteria. We want them here, so let's do that. But I think once you start doing that, you are getting into a committee, or you're getting a staff-level person that basically is starting to mess around with our fiscal policy, our economic development strategies as a United States. So again, I think to the extent that we could take out some of that subjectivity and just lower that threshold so that we can catch all those folks. They still have to go through all the background checks. They still have to go through everything else that we require in the United States. But nevertheless, I think that we should just make sure that this is just not a subjective, I'm in a good mood today, I want to approve this, or I don't like this industry. People's bias get involved every single day, so we just need to be very careful about that.
Great point, David. Thanks. You have anything to add, Jason?
I would echo everything Michelle and David said. As I said before, I don't like the fact that it's a parole. There's no visa status. That's a big, big thing. So yeah, we get this parole, we get this piece of paper, and after 5 years, sorry, you're back to square one again. So now you've grown this company. What are you going to do? It's tough. It's difficult. You can get a visa. You can get a green card. You can go back to your home country and apply like everyone else. I know it takes an act of Congress to reform the immigration laws and get us a visa for these entrepreneurs, but that's part of the bad part I see about it. Additionally, there's another component in the rule deep, and this is, again, we're trying to synthesize 70, 80 pages of this proposed rule for you guys real quick, but there's another component that says the international entrepreneur has to maintain 400% above the poverty line. So essentially numbers, what that means is if the poverty line for a household of 2 people, you and your spouse, is $20,000, means you have to have income each year, prove it, of it over $80,000. And that's, you know, if we're getting higher, maybe it's not a big deal if your company's running successfully, but if it's not, you get your parole taken away, sorry. You know, so there's a bunch of components in there that aren't really great.
And so I actually worked at a startup before I joined Forward, and it was a really successful startup. It was a company called Mike in New York that has been incredibly successful in the
Did you
digital
get paid
media space.
$80,000 a year?
I didn't. I didn't have 15% stake though. I wasn't applying for this rule or anything. But I just want to say that the founders were incredibly driven people, and one of the things that they told their investors is they were going to keep a very low salary and not use the investment they received on their salary. So they were taking $25,000 a year in New York frickin' City.
Yeah.
Can you imagine living on $25,000 in New York City? It's tough in Austin, trust me, it's harder in New York. So I think that is a really hard requirement for a lot of companies to meet. So I do want to get to turn it over to questions and make this more of an interactive discussion, but would like to give our panelists just like a 1-minute opportunity each for any concluding thoughts you'd like to leave us with on the impact you think this rule could have on the Austin tech ecosystem, Texas, and the country more broadly.
Sure. Yeah, real quickly, I speak on this exact point every month. All these buildings down here, all this strong economy, more so than you would ever think, is based on the work of international people in this city. The success of Austin continuing to be this great economic city depends in large part on having international people here. So I encourage you to go to Forward. I encourage you to make your comments on this rule. I encourage you to contact your congressperson. We love having this right now. We love having this great room full of all these international people. If that's going to continue, we have to reform our immigration system. I guarantee you, whether you think it's impacting you or not, this stuff is impacting every single person in this room. Very important stuff.
I would say you do have a voice, and Jason's correct. In reaching out, the volume of people, the more and more people that are getting behind this with comments, I think is extremely important. This is a tremendous step in the right direction. There's no question about that. There are things that can be done, and like I said, we've already submitted our comments as well, but there are things that can be done to make it better. At Angelo Economics, we focus on bringing folks into this local economy. Angelos was the chief economist and headed economic development for the city of Austin years ago. And so we love doing that. That's kind of what our business is. And just one plug, if you don't mind, next week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we've got about 65 high net worth Chinese individuals that are going to be coming here. High net worth, minimum definition of at least $100 million net worth. They're coming here. That's pretty high net worth, if you ask me. They're coming here. We basically have a catalog of about 85 projects at this point in time, over $2 billion, where effectively we are matching the capital with the investments. We've already made some good matches thus far. To the extent that there are some companies here that are looking for capital, which I think probably all of you could raise your hand, let me know before I leave. Thank you.
I need to hurry up and come up with my business idea. So
Please do it.
I'm going to let you go because I'm thinking about the $100 million.
So, in terms of the new rules, I'm really happy to see some change is going to be made. And I really hate to see some of my friends, like we were all students, we were all students, we were talking about doing something new, cool, but at last, they have to surrender to life. They have to surrender to all different kinds of rules. So I'm just a little sad to see that. So I hope this change of policy can really encourage international talents to stay here. And speaking of like bringing really like rich Chinese investors, I am Chinese, so I have lots of channel to talk with those people. I know, like there is really, I can feel the competition is going on. They're trying to bring all talents back to China because they have tons of money. I don't know where they have it. Sometimes but like they're trying to steal, and there is a competition. And cities in China like Beijing, Shanghai, it's pretty much like New York City. It's like the Silicon Valley, where they're trying to build it the same way. So their accelerators, all the patents are exactly the same. And for people like me, or we may have second thoughts to go back home because the language issue, the market, we're more familiar with the market, but there are like different pros and cons. So I think once we, like people like me, once we finished our education, I would say it's better for us to stay here because everything we learned is probably in English, and all the, I finished undergraduate school in 22 and I moved to the United States. And so the first impression of how the society goes is probably the US. So we have problem moving back, and we have to understand all the, like when you do marketing and sales and business, you just handle people a different way in China. And in the US, it's a little easier, and if you have a technology idea, it's probably a little easier for us to implement here. Otherwise, we have to know really some big, rich guys in China to make it happen. So I would say there are pros and cons. If this kind of policy can actually happen, that's definitely going to encourage more people to stay here, to start business based in the United States. And probably they have an opportunity to expand their market in China or India or Colombia or South America, Mexico. But I think this rule is definitely, if like the White House handle it correctly, it can definitely make more companies settle here and expand internationally. That's basically my idea.
That's very good. I'm choking on your comments there. It's really good. Well, we want you to stay here, and I think that we're grateful that we have a bunch of people to do that. The last thing I think I would add, choking on my allergies from this year, we need someone to come up with solving allergy problems in Austin. Maybe that's my $100 million idea. Is that if y'all are in the room, and whether you're looking to hire talent internationally, or that you have used Uber or Lyft and you can't anymore in our city, right? Or that you can't access emerging technology funds because, by the way, we don't have that anymore. That we have no incentives right now to bring companies in that we've utilized. There's never been a period of time that I've seen in the recent years where we're at a standstill between government and tech and future growth of our city. And so if anything else, whether this resonates with your business, what I have learned from just being in Austin for 25 years, it tends to be that the tech community, large tech does its thing, the startup community does its thing, university sort of does its thing. I don't even know who the mayor was, honestly, 4 years ago, right? We don't really participate, but I would say there's never a better time just to come forward. We lost Uber and Lyft because nobody came out to vote. 17% of the population came out to vote, and it wasn't anyone who even uses the service, right? And so if you want to have transformation in the city and continue on, find what's interesting to you, step up, and be an advocate, because what I found for sure is it's not necessarily the best and brightest, it's who shows up. And so please show up and support our city and our growth and our future.
I think that's a great final thought, Michelle. And the last thing that I want to leave y'all with is very similar. It's just simply please stay engaged. As I mentioned at the beginning of our panel, I'm going to send around an email to y'all with a link to leave a comment on this policy. You literally can change what this final rule looks like. It's a pretty exciting opportunity to be able to craft the policy that will help our startup community. And finally, stay engaged even beyond this rule. So this rule, it's an executive action coming straight from the White House. It is not permanent. It can be wiped away by the next president with a single stroke of a pen. We need more lasting rules that are going to benefit our tech community in so many different ways when it comes to keeping international entrepreneurs here. We talked about the H-1B system a little bit. It literally determines which high-skilled workers we accept based on a lottery. That's crazy. Additionally, students like Leong, they don't have a straight pathway to become a permanent US citizen. They go on an optional practical training program like Leong's right now, and then the next step for them is frequently an H-1B, where you got a 1 in 3 chance. So there are so many ways in which the immigration system lets down our economy, lets down our families, lets down our communities, and Forward is here to help you find opportunities to speak up on this issue and to be engaged. And that's what we want to work with all of you on. So if any of you are interested in staying engaged on this issue and speaking with members of Congress, putting your names on op-eds, working with us in a variety of capacities to advocate for immigration reforms, please come find me after the panel. My coworkers are at the back of the room, Zyra, Emily, and Annie. Please raise your hands quickly. You can go talk with them. So that's my final thought, and I want to open up to y'all. What questions do you have for our panelists? Here up front.
Just more of a comment to the person who is thinking about going international. You know, we're competing not just in the U.S. as a startup hub, but, you know, with all over the world are all competing with these value packages. So just to value add for her a little bit. So France, for example, great package, but they have the same exact issues. They too realize that growth has to come from international, but they too have the same visa issues as well, and the same national issues of maybe this push against immigration for all the wrong reasons. But the tech community, again, leading that charge, as Michelle knows, there's some great events going on in Paris and the great streamlined process they're going to get the visa issue. So as you're looking to go international, the first question though has to be, what's your visa plan to do that? Because when I was advising folks in France, they had great ideas, how do I get to US? I'm like, well, first, let's not get ahead of ourselves, let's think about the visa issue. So just a point about everyone looking at going international, you're gonna have to think about that first, and it's tricky everywhere, as far as I know.
Thanks for the comment.
Actually, to follow on that, you're right. There's great international competition for people exactly like you. And for the last couple of years, I was running the Innovation Technology Center in Mongolia, and I was bringing U.S. technologies from universities and getting investment to go up there, do the research, commercialize it. Then we took them to Hong Kong and plated the technologies there in Hong Kong because the Hong Kong government was giving matching funds. I was in exactly this meeting in April, where the financial secretary of Hong Kong, you know, you've got the Minister of Innovation, Technology, and the Minister of Finance both sitting there nodding their head, and they were talking directly exactly how do we, when they're trying to transform Hong Kong back to what it was, you know, and do more manufacturing, more innovation, med tech, fintech, all of this other thing. Immigration is, well, you know, but it's very easy. They don't have the city, county, state, federal, all of these levels of bureaucracy and regulations and hoops and everything else. They, with the stroke of a pen and the flip of, and it's not temporary. It's permanent.
Yep.
Right. And by the way, they've got the funds to back it up. So I was a little bit reluctant to throw gas on this fire, but you really, this is no, I'm saying that there's, you know, for guys like you, you've got a tremendous amount of options. Now, the United States still, you know, look outside, you've got a great, and this isn't the war guitar, okay? So, you know, it's not -50. So there's a great lifestyle and so on. We're still gonna have that kind of inherent advantage, but it's going to be harder and harder, and that hill is only going to get steeper. And unless things start going faster, it's going to still continue to be a difficult road. So those are my own comments. Can I comment a little bit?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Just going to say a few words, just from a political standpoint. I was the 3-term mayor of the city of Sugar Land, and we were very aggressive as it relates to economic development. While I was mayor, I was on the board of Texas One Economic Development here in Austin. And you were talking about the change of an administration with the stroke of a pen being able to do things. And quite honestly, if you think about where we were 10 years ago, granted it was a very difficult economy back in the 2008 timeframe, but at that point in time where we had a $9 billion deficit that we were coming into the legislative session, basically balanced that budget, but then they created the enterprise fund. So $400 million of state capital to be used to attract businesses to come to the state of Texas. You talked about the Emerging Technology Fund a moment ago. Those were tools that we basically had. We're limited now when it comes to those type of tools. And I can say that same thing from a local perspective as well. And so your voice matters. And so when you're talking to the mayor, you're talking to council members, I mean, the pendulum has definitely swung from one of, we want to incentivize companies to come here, create jobs, to we don't want that at this point in time. So we need all the tools in our arsenal to be able to attract companies, to be able to come to this local economy. And this obviously is one as well. But as you're so right, just with a stroke of a pen, all of a sudden Vancouver could be the hot spot where people go because they've got capital. Austria.
Another great one. They've got
Right.
a global initiative.
Right. And again, when you stop and you think about the international entrepreneur, I mentioned before about this company, Restream. How would you like a year ago, 2 years ago, to be an entrepreneur in the Ukraine where you've got wars erupting, you've got people being killed in the streets? That really can snuff out your entrepreneurial spirit. And then to be able to bring people here to the United States where it's a more stable environment, stable economy, that's what we're trying to do. And these are the tools that we definitely need, so we need your voice.
By the way, I live here in Austin, but I'm from Sugar Land, so thank you.
Oh, fantastic.
I'm curious, as we voice our concerns for this rule and this bill, are there certain things that are ways that we can position what we say that might be able to have more of an influence against some of these detractors, or leave some of these hurdles that you could recommend?
Can I answer that? Go to our website for Angelou Economics or the International Accelerator. You'll see a blog there. You'll see some white papers that Angelos has basically written. You were talking about op-eds. We've done that, and so I think the more consistent that we all can be, where they're going to sit there and take score and say, okay, well, everyone's saying 50,000 is the number, everyone's saying 100,000 is the number, I think we should be consistent. And by the way, talks about Sugar Land, 160 years of growing sugar, processing sugar, refining sugar. With all that emphasis on sugar, you know what our motto is in the city of Sugar Land? Sugar Land where there is no equal. It's really corny, and in 5 minutes one of you is going to say, oh, you mean the little blue packet.
Sugar Land is booming, by the way. It's amazing.
I want to tag quickly on the answer to your question, because here's a real great response that resonates with politicians, because we speak with politicians on this all the time. It's one thing for an immigrant, an international immigrant, to say, hey, I've got this idea, I want to bring it here, I want to grow my company. It's another thing for you, any of you here as a constituent, to say, here's what's happening to my business. I'm a constituent in your district. I'm limited by this H-1B lottery in how I can grow my business. You, politician, are holding me back as a business owner, a small business owner, a medium-sized business owner, from growing my business. You're forcing me to go through a lottery. That's ridiculous. I am a constituent here who should be able to grow my business, innovate as much as I want. So how dare you, politician, say I'm limited by 85,000 or I'm limited by this restriction? That resonates with people to go, whoa, 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 whoa. So it's a U.S. business, it's a company issue. Make sense?
So my question almost sort of piggybacks on that. So I was kind of afraid to ask this question in the environment that we're in right now. So please, everybody, I'm asking this question just on a factual level with no political thing behind it.
Put a caveat.
So, I mean, the current idea is that we're going to have, a large immigration of refugees. I think it was like 65,000 last time I heard, or something like that. Does that put any negative effect on somebody like him being able to get their visa? Does it negatively impact others in line, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It's like if you put the 65,000 in front, or does that have any...
Factually, I think it's just separate.
They're just separate, so it has no impact at all on whether or not...
That 85,000, no.
Right.
Okay,
And that's the point that I was making before about separating this one particular issue. This is not an illegal immigrant that's coming in to get $100,000 to make an investment in a particular company. That's why we have to totally separate this issue, and it's extremely difficult at this point in time. And the politicians don't want to separate the issue. And some of the, just look at the debates.
Okay, so a comment and question. I think you made some really good points about using our influence, and I hope everybody here who's a citizen is registered to vote. And if you're not, let me know and I can help you do that. Because we need to be voting if we're going to talk to be constituents. The question is this: that the capital requirement, 345,000 from U.S. sources, is one of the avenues, and that seems like a catch-22 because seems like it'd be really hard to raise capital from U.S. investors when you don't know, or you know whether you've even gotten this dispensation to be here. So how will that work? Are there any mechanisms? It almost seems like we need some kind of global angel network to help address that.
Well, you can take it one step further. In fact, this is what we were talking about when I first got here. How would you like to go to an investor? It's one thing, here's my pitch, this is what we want to do, and I'm trying to get this capital. Now, introduce, while you're having that conversation, oh, by the way, are you a qualified investor? Are you going to be able to get me my visa in addition to that? That's a conversation you don't really want to have, and that's kind of like, all right, what's your blood type? Let's talk about, you don't want to get into that type of a discussion. And so there are some issues that need to be worked out in connection with this, and you need to take that subjectivity. What's qualified? What's not qualified? So.
Yeah, that's a big one. I was in San Francisco last week talking to rooms 3 times the size, and everyone's going salivating this, yeah, and they go, wait, so I've got to go to an investor and say, I need this documentation from you to show 3 startups, $1 million. That's not an easy conversation. And so, and ultimately to your answer too, yeah, there is no way. You got to do that first in order to get this parole.
And Michelle, can you tell us a little bit about how hard is it to raise investment, kind of generally? I'm sure you're very into this, and how much harder would it be to try to do that while you're abroad and can't even guarantee that you're going to be able to get it?
To your point, like, it's an excellent point, which is, imagine the investor side as well, because you're looking at the venture risk already of 1 in 20 working right, and then you add to it the fact that I may not know if I do invest that actually you might stay here and be successful. It makes that success rate and that risk profile very unattractive to make an investment anyway. And so, your point of maybe we need to look at what do we do to support that, and I think that's excellent. I don't have all the answers on it, but it definitely makes it even more difficult.
Some more people.
I have a question. I'm in the midst of creating a global broadcasting network, and if I have employees that work in various countries around the world, will that be a problem if they're located there in their own countries with working with my company, which will be located here?
Working abroad doesn't require a U.S. visa.
So they can come and go?
Yeah.
They can come and go on temporary non-working visas to the U.S., but if they're going to do any work in the U.S., they would need a work visa like an H-1B.
Thank you very much.
I think the United States has the highest salaries for software engineers. Canada has much lower salaries, and the United Kingdom has much lower salaries. So certainly one of the reasons for that would be the supply and demand. So if you open up the supply so much more that you want to open, I think you mentioned that 1 in 3 applications, only 1 in 3 applications get approved. So if you open so much supply, then doesn't it mean that my salary as a software engineer will ultimately stop growing and potentially will actually go down?
So that's an excellent question, and especially from the greater Austin region, right now we have over 59,000 job openings, yet we have an unemployment rate that's historically low, and so most of those job openings right now are all in tech, in high tech, and in software development, because we don't have enough demand of those skill sets to fulfill the jobs that we have. Right, and so it's specific to our region because we're such a tech region and have a gap of skills for the jobs we have available. And as we've looked at all the other cities that are tech as well, they're suffering from similar problems. That's not really the issue. The issue we have is how do we get enough qualified folks for the jobs of tomorrow? And that's gonna drive prices more than anything else. So we can't keep up with the demand right now. So.
I also want to add as well, the comment that I mentioned before about Skooks, the company that's in Greece. You're talking about supply and demand. Well, by virtue of the fact that they were forced to go back to Greece and basically create the jobs there, the programming jobs are not here in the United States. They're in Greece. And so we're trying to kind of change that paradigm so that the jobs can be created here, to give you and the other programmers an opportunity to be able to be employed by them. And so that's really what we're trying to do from a job creation perspective.
So what do you think major universities like Texas and A&M and other universities around the country could help students like himself with their companies to flourish and also influence political decisions to make this easier for international students to stay?
Leon, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah. So, back on that gentleman's question. So basically, if this new type of.
It won't reach all of it.
It doesn't.
Fred, is there another
Well,
wireless mic
here we
over
go.
there?
No, but.
Work so hard though.
So basically, if this new type of policy got approved, you're gonna have people apply for this type of visa. And when I think about this type of group, it's probably international students. They're in their late 20s or early 30s, and they have some tech background, they have idea, and they love to create something new. Those people mainly come from US universities. They graduate there, they got an education there. So probably people have to broadcast the information in the university level to encourage those engineering science students, let them be aware of such thing and encourage them through some university programs. So that's gonna be a totally university level thing. But in terms of seeking investment, it is a little hard because for international students, some from countries not so wealthy as the United States, so they probably never know the concept of VC or angel investment. So they don't know, they just don't know there is such thing. And probably when they look at this type of visa, they don't understand it. So there is some learning curve or education through university level programs. So I highly encourage universities. I come from A&M, and I know the School of Engineering and the business school and different colleges are trying to work together to make a lot of great programs in the summer, in the winter, to encourage students, even give them a little start money, like $1,000, $2,000 money to let them proof concept their ideas. So that's one thing I really, really like in my university. I'm pretty sure lots of universities are doing the same thing. So that's one route I can see it can help those international talents to stay. And I also have one comment on that gentleman's question on salary and demand and supply. So basically now, as long as I see, software engineers are paid well. So lots of engineering students, even though they're not computer science, they're electrical engineer, they're mechanical engineer, they're even petroleum engineering because the oil and gas is going down. They are seeking jobs in software engineers, so that makes them really, really competitive. But I think if the new policy got approved, there will be opening or other alternative options in other area where you can start your own business. So that's going to balance this kind of pressure and make the entire vehicle go more healthily. So that's what I think about this. So it's
And the other thing, to your point, is we do need to go to the regent system, right, at the top levels of university, and advocate on behalf of the business community and what our needs are. And so it's something that we do need to do that would be powerful. You're right.
We definitely need to involve the universities, just like Michelle's talking, at the top to be involved. But I think if you stop and you think about a university, if they have an accelerator or an incubator within there, think about the folks that are going to be working there. Many of them are going to be students. So you've got a student visa associated with that, so this really isn't dealing with that. And other ways that the universities can use the system, I mean that in a good way, is if you're an adjunct professor or there are other things that you don't have a lottery system where you can get a visa to be able to do that. And that's really what the universities are doing. But I think as it relates to the long term, the universities need to be involved in this because it really needs to be a consolidated effort.
I think Fred's got a question right up here.
Yeah, I've got 3 quick comments. One is I'm a serial entrepreneur and I've started 8 different businesses, 7 for under $100,000 and 1 for $150,000. So bootstrapping is like the way to do it. And in software as a service, certainly a $365,000 threshold is much much too high. IA funds companies at $50,000. Here at Capital Factory, we do 2 individual partners at $25,000 apiece, unlocks matching funds from our Capital Factory investment fund for another $50,000, so it's $100,000. You can do lots of things, including food trucks, and it's not all just tech. There's lots of entrepreneurial opportunity in very creative disciplines that creates jobs for well under $100,000, so that's got to get fixed. Second point to Michelle's comment about civic involvement. There's a great discussion tonight at Owen's Garage on the east side at 6 o'clock, 6 to 8 with Mayor Adler about the role of technology in politics and in civic engagement. He is extremely motivated to be engaged with our technology community in this city, and I would encourage you all to attend. He's just back from the White House and South by Southlawn on Monday, along with a bunch of other people. So we're in a unique place here in Austin to be a beacon and a voice for technology's role to help move this conversation forward. The third thing is, I think the biggest complication with this rule and the why only 3,000 people may qualify is because the top of the funnel is, to the point that you made back here, sir, is that it is kind of a catch-22. You already have to have sort of a legal visa to convert to this kind of a visa to qualify. I mean, you've got to be on a existing company's cap table for above 10 or 15% for some period of time, even to qualify to participate. So the number of people that really qualify at the very beginning, as a student, you're really not supposed to be working. You're not supposed to be on any cap table. You're supposed to be studying, and so how you, the legal position you are presumed to be in to even qualify in the very first place, I think, is the narrowing of this whole situation, where there probably are only 3,000 people that qualify, or you somehow have become a co-founder or an executive of an existing company that is run largely by Americans, but you happen to be overseas. They found you, you were a student, you went away, but you're somehow a tech co-founder or something, and you got on their cap table, but you're really offshore. So the circumstances under which you can actually qualify to even apply are so narrow individually that I think that's where the beginning of the whole problem is. It's just way too narrow.
We have time for a couple more questions. Any more questions?
Just a short comment. So I'm actually a subject to this reform. So I'm an entrepreneur from Ukraine, and I'm a software engineer. We don't shoot people on streets, but really, thank you so much for pushing it. So I'm first time in the US ever, and I came to Austin just for this startup week, and I like it so much. And Capital Factory is a great place. So just wanted to say thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Hey, David, could you say again the website you mentioned that you can get the language and how you would advocate for this?
I would go to angeloueconomics.com. And for those of you that are interested in the summit next week, it's texaschinasummit.com. And then also, all of that is at internationalaccelerator.com.
And I think we had one more question here in the second row.
It's more common to show up. I'm international founder as well, and just to show up the competition between the countries, how far it is, because we were thinking, basically, we were living in Dubai at the time, so we were thinking staying in Dubai, going to UK, going to US. In Dubai, from the city, we were offered basically around $100,000 in the value of the services to stay in Dubai. In UK, our discussion ended up by simple Brexit discussion.
Right.
At the moment, I was thinking whether if I need a visa, there is no discussion going there. So competition for the developers, for the founders, is very, very strong. There was discussion about Vienna. One friend of mine was very near going to the US, was convinced by mayor of Vienna city, getting a very special arrangement with the University of Vienna and staying there. So company was founded in Austria, in Vienna. It is not just a visa issue, it's a lot of countries are competing on money, on the environment, on everything. The competition is getting stronger and stronger every year.
Absolutely, thanks for sharing. So with that, we'll close out our panel. I'd like to ask you all to please give our panelists a round of applause for taking the time out today to share their expertise. And I want to thank you all one final time for attending and for being part of this discussion. Would love for you all to stay engaged. Later today, I will send around that link to leave a public comment on this rule. And I encourage you all to stay involved and be part of the process. So thanks so much.
Thanks for coming out.
Thank you. Yeah, you too, David.